the shrouded Tarn. Elden Ring had always felt more like a dream than a game. Its sprawling landscapes, cryptic lore, and hauntingly beautiful world carried an air of mysticism that lingered long after you'd powered down your console. I'd spent hundreds of hours exploring its secrets, unraveling its riddles and challenging its brutal bosses. By the time I reached my third playthrough, I thought I had seen everything the lands between had to offer. I was wrong. It started with a simple curiosity, a Reddit post on an obscure gaming thread. The title read, "Anyone else find the Tarn of Dusk?" The post was vague, filled with screenshots that didn't look quite right, areas I didn't recognize, foggy landscapes that didn't belong to any part of the map I knew. The replies ranged from skepticism to intrigue, with some claiming they had stumbled upon this place accidentally, only to find it gone in subsequent playthroughs. One comment stood out. "It's not in the files. Data miners haven't found it. If you see the Tarn, leave. It isn't meant to be there." I should have listened. I was in the Altus Plateau, wandering the shaded region between the grand lift of Dectus and the forest spanning Great Bridge. The terrain felt familiar, the jagged cliffs, the golden leaves falling gently from unseen branches, but as I moved toward an overgrown path I didn't remember, the air seemed heavier. The usual golden light of the lands between dimmed, the sunlight fading to an overcast gray. The area wasn't marked on my map. It didn't even have the faint dotted trails that typically hinted at a new path. But the path ahead beckoned, its cobblestones cracked and moss-covered, leading down into a dense, shrouded fog. The closer I got, the quieter the game became. The ambient wind stopped. The faint, distant cries of monsters disappeared. All I could hear was my tarnished's footsteps echoing unnaturally, as if the sound were bouncing off invisible walls. I pressed on. The fog thickened until it felt almost tangible, curling around my character in ghostly tendrils. I emerged into a clearing, and there it was, the Tarn of Dusk. The water was perfectly still, its surface an obsidian mirror reflecting the overcast sky. The surrounding trees were skeletal, their branches clawing upward like desperate hands. A faint, oppressive hum filled the air, low and almost imperceptible, like the sound of something vast and unknowable breathing just beneath the surface. There was no sight of grace here, no enemies, no NPCs, just the Tarn and the silence. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Then, a faint ripple disturbed the water, emanating from the center of the Tarn. It wasn't caused by wind, there was none, but by something moving beneath the surface. The ripple grew, the water darkening even further, until the reflection of the sky disappeared entirely. Text appeared on the screen. "Will you gaze into the Tarn?" I hesitated. This wasn't part of the game. There was no dialogue box, no confirmation prompt, just that single line of text. Against my better judgment, I pressed the button to interact. The screen faded to black, and when it returned, I was no longer by the Tarn. My tarnish stood in what looked like a desolate version of Lendl, the royal capital. The golden light of the Erd tree was gone, replaced by an ashen sky streaked with crimson veins. The city was in ruins, even more so than in the late-game sections. Buildings collapsed entirely, ash drifting like snow in the still air. The map didn't load when I opened it. My inventory was empty. My character's armor and weapons were gone, leaving them clad only in a tattered robe I'd never seen before. As I wandered the ruins, the oppressive hum from the Tarn persisted, louder now, vibrating through my headset. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision, darting between the rubble. They weren't enemies, at least. Not ones I could target. Every time I tried to approach them, they vanished, leaving behind faint whispers that grew more distinct the longer I stayed. "Why are you here? You shouldn't have looked. It's watching you now." I found myself drawn toward the Erd tree, or what remained of it. Its trunk was shattered, the glowing golden sap replaced by a dark, viscous liquid that pooled at its roots. As I approached, the whispers stopped, replaced by a voice, low, guttural, and layered, as if multiple throats were speaking in unison. "You see now, don't you? The truth beneath the golden lie." A figure emerged from the shadows near the base of the tree. It wasn't a boss or even an enemy, at least, not one I could fight. It was humanoid but wrong, its body wrapped in ash-gray robes that seemed to shift and writhe like smoke. Its face, or lack thereof, was the most unsettling part. There was only a void where its head should have been, a black abyss that seemed to pull at the edges of the screen. The figure raised an arm and the screen distorted, flickering with static. My tarnished collapsed to their knees, and the camera zoomed in on their face. It was the first time I'd ever seen their expression, wide-eyed, mouth agape, frozen in terror. "There is no grace here," the voice said. "Only shadow." When the screen faded to black again, I was back at the Tarn of Dusk. The water was still, the hum softer now, almost soothing. But something was different. My tarnish didn't respond to my controls. They stood motionless, staring into the water as if transfixed. The camera panned slowly, revealing a figure standing across the Tarn. It was the same faceless presence I had seen beneath the shattered Erd tree, its robes billowing despite the still air. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw myself, my own face, reflected in the Tarn, staring back at me. The game crashed. I tried relaunching the game, but my save file was gone. Even stranger, the disc itself refused to eject, as if it were stuck in the console. When I finally managed to remove it, the once pristine surface was marred by faint, spiraling grooves etched into the plastic. I haven't dared to play Elden Ring since. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the Tarn of Dusk, its still waters rippling as something stirs beneath the surface. I stand there transfixed by the crystalline onyx waters drawing me into their depths. And I wonder, did I bring something back with me, or did it let me go?